We are live.
Great. So should we get started here, or should we wait another minute for folks to come in?
Let's start.
Okay, great. Well, welcome everybody. This is the second policy discussion session. This is an open discussion, as Hector mentioned, and being recorded and live streamed on YouTube. So if you would rather not show your face, please turn off your video, and please stay muted right now until we get into the discussion portion, or if you have any questions. Oh, here's someone else coming in. Great, Hector, do you want to get us started here?
Well, yeah, thank you. So my name is Hector Dominguez. I am the Open Data Coordinator as the City of Portland. So Open Data is part of the Smart City PDX program, and we are hosted at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. I'm also coordinating the work around privacy and surveillance technologies, and I'm very happy and glad that we have now the second discussion on this surveillance technologies policy development roadmap. This work is also done in collaboration with the Office of Equity and Human Rights, and we are partnering with Cascadia partners just to do all the logistics and engagement as well. In addition to that, so we have as a co-host, we have two community leads. The community leads is a program that the Smart City PDX is actually putting together and doing right now. We have Surya Raj Joshi and Anisha Cochran Domas. So welcome everybody who's joining today. So let's start with some logistics.
Yeah, so I'm sure you all are super familiar with this by now, but just to go over kind of our Zoom controls here. As I said before, if you can keep yourself muted for now, and then until the presentation, and if there's any Q&A, feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hand if you have any anything you'd like to share or have any questions. There's also the chat box kind of right in the middle of your bottom sort of control bar there. Feel free to use the chat box to add any comments or questions in there as well. And you can also take a look at who's participating in the participants button there. And then feel free to also provide any nonverbal feedback and reactions as well. Next slide. So the agenda for today is we'll do some quick introductions and do a quick live polling to get a sense of who's in the room today. And then we'll do a quick presentation on some background on what this policy development process is like and what it's going to look like. And what the policy development sort of roadmap is going to be. And then we'll go into some discussion here. We have two topics that we want to cover today, which is around governance, around surveillance tech policies, and also community involvement. So we'll start with governance and take a quick break and then go into the community involvement discussion. And then at the last maybe 5 minutes here, we'll go over next steps and then try to get you out of here by 7:30 today. Next slide. So if you'd like to receive a gift card today for your participation, and please, you're welcome to send your name and email to the email here and fill out a form. You'd be eligible for a gift card if you live or work or play in Portland, and your participation is not part of your main job or representing an organization. And also city employees are also not eligible. Yeah, we want to make sure that you are compensated for your time as well. So, and that's important to us. So if you'd like to receive a gift card, please share your contact information with the email there. And I'll turn it over to Hector to give a quick introduction on the team here.
Well, I'm going to let introduce the whole team by themselves. So I already introduced myself. So Judith, please.
Hi, everybody. I'm Judith Mowry. I'm the Senior Policy Advisor for the city's Office of Equity and Human Rights. And I'm very lucky to be kind of embedded with the Smart Cities team on this work on surveillance and privacy. Thank you for coming tonight. Looking forward to our discussion.
Thank you, Judith. Onisha.
Hi, my name is Onisha Cochran, and I'm a lead on the Smart City PDX policy team, and I'm so excited to be here with you guys tonight.
Thank you, Onisha. Surya.
Hi, everyone. My name is Surya Joshi. I am also really happy to be with all of you tonight. I'm one of the community lead for 2022 cohort.
Thank you, Surya. Irene, please.
Hello, everybody. My name is Irene Kim. I'm one of the engagement consultants from Cascadia Partners, helping with facilitation today. And yeah, very excited to be here. I've learned so much about surveillance technologies. I'm originally from Portland. I've been here since I was 7 years old. So yeah, happy to be here and thank you for joining.
Thank you, Irene. And Sachi.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sachi, the second half of the Cascadia consultant team, and also very excited to be here and join this discussion.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for all the work that everybody has put in for this policy and these events too. Next, please. All right. So we want to see who's actually joining us today. So I'm going to, you will see a window pop up with 3 questions. How and it's around demographics and what kind of activity you're doing and how familiar you are with this, the digital justice issues and surveillance technologies. So I'm gonna give like a minute here. Appreciate everyone. All right. Well, thank you for your participation in the poll. There we go. Perfect. Next, please. Before we start these conversations, I just want to share the values. We see, for instance, that these discussions have different opinions, different perspectives, and through our values is the way that we are going to resolve those differences. So the City of Portland has this set of core values adopted by City Council in 2020, and includes being anti-racist, equity, transparency, communications, collaboration, and being fiscally responsible. Among all that, so we are building this idea of digital justice just to see how information and technologies are impacting our lives and what's the role of our city on all this conversation around technologies and information. So next, please. Back in 2019, again, it was a collaboration between the Smart Cities program and the Office of Equity and Human Rights. We put together this set of privacy principles. Through these privacy principles have been guiding the city, and we are also promoting internally and externally, so we can actually become a more responsible agency or agencies in terms of using technology, collecting particularly personal identifiable information or sensitive information coming from those who we want to serve. Next, please. For those who are just joining for the first time, right now we are developing the surveillance technologies policy. And the policy is relatively complex. So we are dividing the policy in 3 big sections. One is inventories, reporting and oversight, general oversight. We also want to create the processes around procurement and use of technologies and information, particularly, well, all centered on city bureaus. And also, what are the privacy services and internal capacity and infrastructure that the city needs to have in order to support all that. Today, we are going to be actually discussing the last section here, which is how we can define an inclusive and effective governance for the use of surveillance technologies in Portland. So we're building this roadmap. Every month, we are taking on one of these pieces and components. We start with a public discussion, which is recorded and live streamed like now. 2 weeks after, we are organizing a policy workshop. In that policy workshop, we are intending to develop collectively a set of recommendations that will inform the policy and those who are drafting the policy, in this case, our team, to put everything there in writing. So we are trying to make also this process as transparent as possible and as inclusive as possible as well. And the idea is that by sometime, by the end of June, we can actually have a full policy that everybody can actually review and send comments back. Next, please. If you have any questions, please feel free to add it in the chat or actually tell us right now.
Yeah, are there any questions about just some background on this policy development on surveillance technologies here? And feel free to unmute yourself or use the chat box. I know some of this might be kind of a refresher for some folks who joined us at the first policy session. But
all right, I think we can move on for now, and feel free to add it in the chat as well. Well, thank you. So for today, again, we're going to look into governance. So the structural and operational considerations for decision making in surveillance technologies in the city of Portland. A point of clarification, this policy is only focused on city government and not the city as a whole yet. So we are actually intending to build the foundational pieces for the technology first. And then once that is in place, then we can start talking about larger challenges. So the second portion of this is going to be a discussion, a conversation on what the community involvement that is meaningful to the community, is also inclusive and equitable, should be implemented in all these, you know. And I hope that all these conversations are like frank, open. Also, we want to be creative. We are trying as much as possible not to constrain the things that we can do. And this is also going back to me. Everybody has some biases. My own bias is I am technologist and I need to step back many times, most of the time. So we can hear each other and then really collaborate in a meaningful way. And I appreciate all my teammates for all the feedback putting together this event and this presentation. Next. So the discussion format, we're going to have about 35 minutes per topic, 10 to 15 minutes, just doing a quick overview, some examples perhaps, and then we jumped into the discussion as a group. Next, please. We have some discussion guidelines. Please listen to understand and not to respond. Comment on ideas and not individuals. wait, use self-awareness by asking yourself, why am I talking? And why I'm not talking? So remember that everyone has the right to share their ideas. So no one knows everything. Together we know a lot, and believe in people's narratives. So those are the discussion guidelines and our guidelines in general. Next, please. So for Zoom guidelines, again, some basic logistics, raise your virtual hand to speak. Then the facilitator of that portion of the discussion will cue you. Then please keep your comments short as possible so we can allow others to participate as well. You feel free to use the chat box as well. Share your comments, questions, or send a direct message to any of the organizers. You can send it to me, to Judith, or Irene Sachi, any of us, or Anisha or Surya. We also try to create a space where ideas can flow. And so if you want to provide your feedback in an anonymous way, we have a Google Sheet. We're going to post the link for the Google Sheet. So you can actually type there. So your name is not actually on the chat, on the Zoom chat, and you can just write it there. So in Zoom, it's just an animal icon, something like that. Next, please. Excellent. So it's my pleasure to introduce, and please, Judith Maury. She's going to take over the governance conversation.
Thanks, Hector. And before we move into that, we did have a question in the box from the chat box from Alan asking what happened at the last meeting. And so that was the meeting where we kind of dug into the a little deeper into the topic. And I actually wasn't at that meeting, unfortunately. So I'm wondering if someone would be able to recap that quickly for Alan before we move on.
Sure, very quickly, and we can talk about that. So the last meeting was about surveillance inventories, reporting, and oversight, and it was actually a whole module. So a month ago, we did a public discussions like this, and then 2 weeks ago, we have the policy workshop on that. In that meeting, we took over and explain why we were actually exploring some of the alternatives around like what the inventory should actually contain, how the reporting should be done and performed, and who should be part of the oversight. We can share some of those notes and the worksheet actually in the chat just for you as a reference. Yeah, I don't know. I know it's a lot.
Thank you, Hector. Thanks for planting that part of the process again. And thanks for the question, Alan. So governance, we can move on to the next slide. So, you know, how does policy governance traditionally work in this country and our system? And it tends to take a certain shape, which are things like advisory boards, committees, working groups. Typically, those groups exist mostly for the city of Portland in an advisory role. Some also have some roles that are written into our code and hear appeals, provide expertise, you know, review and enforce policies and regulations. So those are kind of the world of the way that we have approached this traditionally here at the city of Portland. Next slide. But there are some challenges to the traditional approach. There's a limited number of seats at the table. You know, we form a lot of advisories or different kinds of boards and people are invited to come, but there's, you know, a certain number of folks there and people tend to be like, you know, 13 to 15 is the largest size we want to do. So imagine how big Portland is, and those are the number of people to bring to the table. They cost a lot to staff, honestly. It has occurred to me, and I think others, that sometimes the boards can become gatekeepers instead of gateways. so that they actually aren't feeding the community back into their communities, the information or the conversation, and they kind of become the leaders versus folks who are representing a larger point of view. It can be very political. People can really see it as a way to sort of, gain political notoriety and power. And we tend to have, especially when we're talking about communities who have been marginalized by the system, we tend to tap the same folks over and over, and it becomes burdensome for people to be able to show up and be a part of it. We also deal with things like, fatigue, intergroup dynamics, all of those things tend to show up. In our next slide, there are also a lot of ways people are thinking in non-traditional methods of community engagement, and that could be used to think about oversight and accountability. A couple of examples are the World Cafe. Many of you have probably been in some environment where the slide went away. Thank you. When you've been working, went away again. Thanks. With the World Cafe and the National Issues Forum, again, like another kind of that's a group that brings people together, much like we're kind of doing, gives people an education about what the issue is, then has people deliberate it together, really think about the pros and cons and those things. And then there's the citizens' choice work. And that is another group that does bring people together around a deliberative process, meaning that they really examine pros and cons, think a little more deeply about those things. Alan, you're asking what are the advantages of the advisory group approach? And that's actually something we're going to get into when we talk about what are people's thinking about what would be a good way to go forward with the governance of policies regarding surveillance, technology, privacy. So the point of sort of where I was trying to go here was to say, we at the city have made a commitment through our core values and through our equity work to really do things in a much more, you might call it decolonized way, anti-racist way, but really thinking differently because we have a system that we know historically does not work for everybody. So in my work, I'm always asking, is that the only way to do it? And is my thinking limited by being a part of this system and seeing everything through that lens? So what I hope is that as we think about this, we can just go bigger in our thinking. Are there better ways? Can we engage more people? And there are advantages to advisory groups, and they could be improved as well, right? We can look at a lot of different things. Is what we need in terms of how much we are engaging the community, how we can create true oversight and accountability, maybe we're going to need a couple different ways that we're committed to engaging with community. And I think that's also could be a very exciting thing to explore together. So those are just sort of why we're presenting this framework at this point in the conversation. We had a big conversation internally about the word governance at the city of Portland. The city council governs. That's their role. And there are some committees that have some kind of ability to make rulings and make decisions outside of council. But there's also a lot that are advisory. So the next slide. Another thing that we've thought about and talked about internally as we've looked at this work is what happens when, and I'm calling these ethical dilemmas, but what happens when there are tensions between something that has a high value for the common good, but also has a high risk of violating the privacy of individuals? The government has sort of a predecessor to this thinking around things like eminent domain. I don't know if everybody knows how that process works, but at some point somebody said sometimes we're just going to need the property for the hospital or the fire station, and we can't always rely on private sellers to sell it to us. So we need a process basically to buy their property kind of without their permission. There's been a lot of conversation about how eminent domain has been used in gentrifying some areas. Some people may have been around long enough to know the Mount Hood freeway story. But that's a way in which the government leveraged the idea of a larger public need over individual private right. And so in my mind, we will have times when there will be a compelling need for the technology, and it will also possibly have a high risk of violating individual privacy. It would be my hope that we have a system where those conversations are led largely by community, in terms of what our values are and how things weigh out in the end for those examples. Our next, great. So, what we want to talk about is, what should governance or surveillance technology look like for us in the city of Portland? How do people feel about levels of authority? How should it be implemented? How can we make sure governance is equitable and fulfills the goals and responsibilities? And when we say, how do we make sure it's equitable, that's sort of all inclusive of saying that we will always be using the lens of the city core values, the privacy guidance, and digital justice as we work through all of these issues. One reminder is that tonight we can go both big and you can go granular. The idea of this process has been we can kind of have broad conversations and then, really kind of get down into the nitty gritty at the next meeting that we have. And we will have good notes being taken because Irene and Sachi are fabulous at that. And so whatever you contribute will be included in the conversation.
Thank you, Judith. So before we go into discussion, I just want to make sure we get to a question from Alan here about what are the advantages of the advisory group approach. And Alan, if you want to kind of elaborate on your question a little bit.
Yeah, I'm fine to wait, as Judith mentioned, if we're going to talk about it later, but I noticed we had a slide on what doesn't work about it. And so it made sense, if we're considering our options, to understand what does work about it.
Absolutely, Ellen. Yeah, I completely agree. And as I said, I kind of put in what was problematic about it, mainly to say, why would we look at anything outside of what we traditionally have used?
Yeah, so I'm happy to have that conversation as the session moves on. That's fine.
Thanks, Alan. And I'm wondering if people have any questions about what the part that I just put out for everybody. Okay, so as you will see now, that what's being shared on the board is a Miro board, and Irene and Sachi are in it now, and I don't know if other people have joined. Have we shared the link with the group?
We're not going to share the link right now because it's a kind of a lot to navigate in there. So what we're going to be doing is Irene and I are going to be transcribing what people are saying as they're speaking. Hector also put the anonymous Google form in the chat there. You're welcome to kind of be in there writing as we're speaking, or if you prefer, kind of not to be seen or heard and just want to leave written feedback, you can do that. All the questions are in that document already, so you can respond to them there. And you're also welcome to leave comments in the chat. But yeah, we definitely would love for folks to feel comfortable to unmute themselves and respond to this question. So the question is, what should governance and oversight for surveillance technology look like? And what authority should it have? So what should it actually be able to say we can and can't do, where would it intervene, at what points in the implementation of surveillance policy, those types of questions.
And there's no wrong answers. There's no bad questions. We're really hoping, let's just all imagine we're kind of sitting around in a big living room and we're just being able to have this conversation with each other. So we really want to invite you to just, tell us how this hits you, what your thoughts are. Some of us will have thought about it more than others.
Judith, Chris had a question here about if you can talk a little bit more about the World Cafe and other possibilities that you mentioned.
Yes, absolutely, Chris. And in just a second, I will put a link in the box. I'm part of an organization called the National Coalition on Dialogue and Deliberation, and they have a chart of some different types of processes that are used for different kinds of conversations. And so World Cafe is set up where folks come in, they have some questions that that have been chosen for them to share with each other what their thoughts are about them. And you move from table to table. So you answer a set of questions with a certain group of people, then you move into another table and you answer those same questions, and you get around the room and you get a lot of different perspectives that come out together about that. And then you have a process that kind of ties it all together at the end. As I said, there's other examples of, citizen cafe or conversation cafes. That's a process someone developed. I really love that one, where people like go to their coffee house and just say, it's Sunday at 2, we're going to talk about this. And then they just have a process where you go around the circle 3 times and each person, states sort of their initial thing that they're thinking about, whatever the topic is. And then you go deeper to another level and then to a third level. So they're just different ways to think about pulling out the thoughts of everybody. So it's a very inclusive process. And as I said, I will put up the possibilities here. And what we're doing now is not unlike some of the processes where we're having a meeting saying, here's what we need to talk about. We broke the surveillance, all this whole conversation into 3 pieces. We're going to have a broad conversation. And then for those that really want to roll up their sleeves and get into, as they call it in politics, the sausage making of writing policy, that's the meeting in 2 weeks. That gives folks time to do some exploration of what's out there, and to think of different ways that we could do it. So like as I've thought about this when we talk about like the ethical questions, maybe that's a process where we do something much more similar to this, where we don't have just a seated group of experts, but that we would bring people together, explain what the things we were trying to weigh were, and then having an opportunity for people to go study some, come back, and then have that conversation together. So, it's thoughtful in terms of making sure people have enough time to educate themselves to the level they want to be, but it's also inclusive. Anyone can be in the conversation.
So to give folks an example of something that has come up a few times in meetings, we've talked about the potential for using certain surveillance technologies in emergency situations. And community members had a lot of questions about, why would that happen, and sort of who gets to decide that, or have kind of oversight, or reflect on if that was effective and safe and didn't do harm after the fact. That is a potential, I think, intervention point that an oversight body might be able to at least give feedback to the city on whether they thought that was done well or was not done well. So just to maybe kind of give you a real world example of what oversight and governance could actually look like. So I'm curious if folks can think of other examples of situations where we would want to have oversight or governance over how the surveillance policy is being implemented.
Yeah, I have something in mind. So I'm thinking specifically about, there's a specific technology that I won't name that has never really done any like proper validation studies, but it is widely used like all over the US cities. And there are organizations that do those validation studies, or, you know, I can imagine a council that is created of data scientists to do those validation studies, to one, make sure that the accuracy of the technology is there. Because right now, all the accuracy claims for a lot of these organizations come from the marketing departments, not from the engineering departments. And so, you know, there's a lot of claims that don't have scientific backing. So we should be able to have an independent body that validates all the scientific claims that are made by these technologies. And also, on the other hand, I would like to see a different sort of data science team that focuses more on like sociological relationships, and whether this is creating the technology is creating a feedback loop where they put the technology in over-policed communities of color because they think that's where the crime is, and then, you know, because the technology is there, it's, you know, lighting up, sending more police, and so some kind of oversight that prevents that feedback loop of like, oh, this is where the bad people are, just put the technology there. Well, because the technology there, like, you know, we can see that there's more crime, and then, you know, more and more over policing. So those are what like immediately comes to mind as far as like oversight bodies. Thanks.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I love those. And I think, you know, as technology grows and we become more reliant on it, which I just think is the wave of the future, there are going to be more aspects that we are going to need to be collectively paying attention to. And I hadn't thought about that validation study piece, and I think that's really great. What about other ideas about, you know, what we need to be thinking about governing and paying attention to, like Jay just put out, and I'm sorry, is G or J?
It's Jay. You were right the first time.
Great, thank you.
And I don't want to like take over this because I've already like thought about a lot of this stuff. So I sort of have prepared answers, even though I haven't seen any of these questions. But I was also thinking about some sort of like economic oversight that looks at like the return on investment, you know, because these technologies are not cheap, and they make a lot of claims, like I said, that have never been verified. So even if the claims they say are true, that doesn't necessarily mean that the cost benefit analysis is good. So I would love to see some sort of economic oversight to make sure that we're not just throwing money at solutions that, you know, just bleeding the city's budget dry when there's, you know, houseless people, you know, that need homes, and people that need food, and you know, our resources need to go other places. They can't just go into these mystery technologies. So I would love to see more oversight there.
Again, very thoughtful.
Building off of that a little bit, this is Alan, if I may. Some of what I hear in there is that there's both like some kind of routine practice that a governance or oversight group should have or be a part of that deals with the routine technology, surveillance technology purchasing and use of by the city, right? So we want to let an RFP out for this. We want an RFQ. We want a contract for this, and things that happen in the sort of in a routine and ideally very visible way, and an anticipated way, I think is one of the words I'm looking for. But then there's other stuff that just kind of happens, right? A new technology comes on the marketplace. Marketers are pushing it. Maybe somebody enters into some staff at some bureau or somewhere in the city, enters into an agreement to procure it or to test it for free for 6 months or some kind of thing like that, where it kind of escapes the routine and planned procurement. And it's something, but it's impactful enough that some kind of more inclusive decision needs to be made, right? So I guess I'm comparing, there's some things that are just going to happen as a matter of course in the city as it does business, and we should create a structure that allows for governance and oversight of that. But we should also have within that same governance and oversight structure the ability to respond rapidly to some kind of urgent new technological threat to the health and safety of Portlanders, especially Portlanders on the front line of technology change. And so I hear a little bit of all of that in the prior comments as well. So yeah, that's my thought. Thank you.
Nice, thank you. We have a comment in the chat. I feel like there needs to be a strong community component to any kind of governance board created outside of the standard city representation. Some kind of elected representatives maybe, and or representation for community groups, neighborhood associations.
Oops. We lost Judith.
Judith.
Okay, I can continue reading here. Neighborhood associations, private citizens, etc. I think we should have the ability to veto the utilization of any technologies or data analysis systems. It should be completely transparent and deliberate publicly, in my opinion. So yeah, I think this is a great comment and is very comprehensive in explaining kind of what you imagine the roles of a group of people providing oversight or governance should be. I'm curious, like, what you imagine that structure looking like, because that's part of what we're trying to imagine or reimagine a little bit. As Judith and others from the city have shared, the typical structure is, an advisory board or oversight committee. And that's not always very effective and can often cause burnout. And, people are maybe part of those boards, not always for the right reasons. So what are other structures or, pseudo structures that could help us do these things, like, sort of allow citizens and the community at large, non-citizens included, to react to decisions that are made and outcomes that happen from our surveillance policy. And Alan says, even with complete transparency, having guidelines is a necessity to keep an oversight board accountable.
And it's Arowana. I thought it was Alan at first too, because I
Oh,
saw
I'm
the
sorry.
A. That's
Thank
okay.
you.
And that's a great addition to that thinking. Thank you.
What do other people think is what type of structure is needed to have some type of oversight where the community can participate? Should it be a committee that exists and repeats, that serves some type of tenure, a few years, a few months, something like that? Should it be a more amorphous, kind of ever-changing group, completely open to the public at all time? Like, what kind of rails might we want to have on a group like this, if any?
I mean, for me, the more public, the better, in my opinion. And I'm thinking specifically of, like, a decentralized group of hacktivists that are sort of keeping the police in line. That would be, like, ideal for me. I know that that's not necessarily going to be the reality. But yeah, I don't know exactly how this would look, but I know that with, there was that, what was it, Hack Oregon, and there's been a few other organizations that have, worked with different agencies to produce data science projects that are open to the public, where people can learn while they're being a part of the project. And I think that would be an interesting opportunity to do something like that, where there's people that are experts and that are leading the project, and as they're going through it, they're giving folks like lived experience with doing data science projects.
Yeah, I love that. And thank you for bringing that up. That's something we've been talking about with our community leads, that Surya specifically brought up was, a lot of this technical work requires so much learning on a constant basis, because it's also always changing, the ecosystem and landscape of emerging technology. And a lot of folks in the community, and myself included, and I think a lot of our team, always feel like we're struggling to even catch up and understand what we mean by emerging technology or surveillance technology. And in order to kind of give people the tools they need, especially marginalized folks who have not always had a seat at the table or had opportunities to kind of participate in these conversations and learn about these topics, like in order to get them comfortable in these spaces, we need opportunities for people to be mentored and learn and share information, and us ourselves learn from them as well. And Surya, I don't know if you want to talk at all. This is actually, maybe I should put a pin in this a little bit. We're going to talk about this when we talk about community involvement. But Surya, you sort of had the idea of, could we partner with organizations already doing this work to help bring folks in and structure their learning and understanding of these topics through educational opportunities and things like that?
Yes, I think in our group discussion, and then that part will come later. It's probably our last question for tonight is, how to make sure that, we can incentivize community participation. That means training. There are a lot of leadership training. There are city funds and like that other government bodies fund inside city of Portland, and how can we leverage those existing structures in order to make sure that we have an ongoing program where community leadership is built, not only to kind of lead in other different areas, but specifically in technology, where they are well versed in ongoing technology. They have support from outside, where they can learn learn about emerging technology. And then that question is going to come later, but at this point, I think, we do need to make sure that we have a continuing learning opportunity for whatever government body for the individual who are represented in those bodies.
Yeah, thank you, Surya. I just want to highlight a couple comments in the chat here, and then I can pass it back to you, Judith. I saw that Chris also had their hand up, so I'm acknowledging that and not forgetting that, Chris. I see that people are talking about hybrid approach, so a consistent group that meets regularly and has some structure with community representatives and volunteers, and maybe there's some flexibility for people to drop in. You don't have to be part of like the core group in order to participate. I'm seeing Isabel says, perhaps this is more relevant to the next section, but how do we ensure that the most marginalized and vulnerable in our communities are able to contribute? I like the idea of some kind of hybrid structure, but having a component that is open to the public alone is not helpful if it's not accessible to the public. Very true, and agree with that. And I think we all of us participating in this have, and Alan has pointed this out, have had to digest a lot of materials, technical materials that are very difficult. And I think that makes this topic not always very accessible. So it's something we struggle with a lot. And then last comment in the chat, and then Chris, I'll give you the floor. This is a follow-up to that last question. Having a dedicated community director that finds representatives from vulnerable communities. Yeah, we use this model a lot, kind of having a liaison. In this case, we have our community leads who've done such an amazing job, kind of being leaders and representatives of their community, but also bringing in folks to the conversation that they know, and can kind of, be liaisons to those groups. Chris, go ahead.
I like the idea of the hybrid system that Ariana had mentioned. I think it's important to have the public involved all the time. And at the same time, you need experts who know the technology and can keep up with that. But I think it's important to make sure that the experts aren't from companies who are developing the equipment. Because I know other cities are having that problem where those people are trying to influence it because they're trying to say, well, our gear is going to really help solve whatever problem it is. And another problem that I've heard about is that when the city is looking at existing technologies and the police have to report what technologies they have, they're taking a very long time to do it. And then the public comment period ends up ending before the public actually gets information on the technologies. So I think it's important to have deadlines for getting information about the equipment being used and then having that be due before the public has to give their say. Thank you.
Try the camera for a minute. Thanks, Chris. And I had two thoughts I just wanted to say. One, when we're talking about access for communities that have been marginalized or living in the margins, is that, having a couple of people at a table that is still filled with dominant culture folks is not necessarily a way to bring forward voices. So I like the idea somebody brought up about a community director, or the idea of having, even culturally specific processes, mainly to, as we try to build more of an inclusive culture around this, making sure those voices are prioritized. And I also want to say, maybe it's a good time to just move into those second set of questions and just weave it all together into a larger conversation, because I feel like more and more I'm saying, well, maybe this is for later. And I think it is all sort of, what are your thoughts? Onisha, Surya, do you feel like that is what makes sense?
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, Nisha, I was just saying that it seems to me like, it might be a good time to think about and everybody, Irene, Sachi, everybody, whether we want to move into the second part, or am I cutting off something too early? I just see people saying, maybe this is for later. Maybe we just weave it all together at this point.
Well, I'm driving and I'll be pulling up to a stationary destination in if you give me 4 minutes, I think that would be a little bit safe for me. But if you want to hop to it, you can. I'm leaving from the hospital.
Yeah, Judith, what
I'll
do you
be home
think
in a
about?
second.
What do you think about doing our 5-minute break now, and then we could maybe get into some of the community involvement questions?
Perfect.
Yeah, that sounds great. And let's read out this comment in the chat before we take our break. Wow, Chris, thanks. Yes, timeline management would be very important. Perhaps a clear directive that without a specific length of public comment period, no new technology or new analysis may be implemented, or something like that. So I appreciate how people's ideas are coming forward in this way. So yes to a 5-minute break. My cats will love you because I can feed them and they'll stop bugging me.
Okay, sounds good. So should we come back at 6:35 then?
Yep, that sounds great. So yeah, grab a drink of water, take a bathroom break, and please come back at 6:35.
Maybe we can have some music and So for the live stream and the recording, we also have a Google Doc where people can actually submit some anonymous comments. If you are watching this recording, please visit the Smart City PDX website, look into the events, and look into the event for April 13th. So there you will find more information about how you can send some of your comments to us.
Okay, it's 6:35. If you all can either turn your camera on or share a reaction to let me know that you're there, that'd be great. Thank you. Great, thank you so much. All right, so this next part, we're going to talk about community involvement. And I think we're going to go back to our presentation and share a little bit. Actually, maybe we'll just jump right into the discussion. Actually, I thought we had some background slides to share, but yeah. Is that right, team? We're going to go straight into discussion here.
That was my memory. It looks like, Onisha, you're still driving. Maybe, Surya, you want to kick it off?
Yeah, I'll be
Yeah.
pulling over in 1 minute. So if Siri wants to start, I can join in.
Yeah, I think the first question is already here, so like we can just go ahead and then talk about this. So the question is, what community members, community leaders, grassroots organizations should be involved in surveillance, governance, and oversight? The context for this question is, there could be institutional partnership, there could be individual who can represent institution like towards any governance body that we can form. So what are your thoughts on public involvement, and then who should be involved, who should be at the table for decision making on like surveillance technologies?
Yeah, there was already a comment in the anonymous Google Doc that said everyday citizens who live in the areas, ethics and constitution experts, CBOs that serve various community groups from diverse backgrounds. Just wanted to make sure that was captured there. Any other thoughts on this question here about what community members, community leaders, and grassroots organizations should be involved in the surveillance governance?
This might sound weird, but I feel like youth have such a great handle of technologies and can learn technologies so quickly. And this could be a really interesting opportunity for both involvement and development of technological skills. Where, I mentioned before, maybe having like a few experts. But yeah, I would love to see youth involvement because first of all, I want them to understand these technologies. I want to understand, what I want them to know what the police are putting in their neighborhoods, and what like, these law enforcement agencies are doing. And also at the same time, so there's that civic engagement piece, right? So I want them to know what's going on. I also, if we're creating reports, and using data science, then maybe they might be able to pick up some skills there that can turn into a career, or at least, expose them to a new set of skills that might, lead somewhere. And so there's that sort of career development, workforce development piece as well. And yeah, and also just like the sociopolitical kind of context of I would love to see them go through the process of being in an oversight committee and what that entails, and to get that like sort of the civic engagement, but that kind of political engagement where it might lead to like future future committees and stuff like that. Because often, I'm on, I've been on a few different committees, and I'm often like the youngest person or one of the youngest people, and I'm in my 30s. I'm not even that young. So I would really love to see like 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds come to these things. Not that I think it's going to happen. I mean, when I was 18, 19, I wasn't coming to these things, but, I would love to see younger and younger people get involved in committee structures. And I think that we can, find a way to incentivize teenagers and young adults to do that.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great comment.
I know that a bunch of community organizations, was it 24, got like the tech kits in 2019, 2020. So maybe going to those communities and asking their leaders, okay, like, is this something that you're interested in participating in? Do you have capacity? Do you have people within your community who would be a good fit or be interested in participating in this? And just going in directly asking them might be an interesting approach as well.
Just to follow up, was that the tech kits that were given? That was right after quarantine, and that was a partnership between SUMA and Smart City. Am I recalling that correctly? Sorry.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of. SUMA was at the table with a lot of other, or this is Alan, I'm sorry. So that was, it was funded by the CARES Act, which was the prior federal pandemic relief bill before the one that's happening now. And we were part of a number of community groups who came together to design a way to put devices and internet access into the hands of organizations that were closest to community members who were suffering from digital isolation. And so that's that project. Some people call it Tech Kit, some people call it CARES Act Tech Kit, right? It's got a, but that's the one, yeah.
I'm sorry, my technology. I got kicked out right at the beginning of that comment, but I heard the part about the youth, and I just wanted to respond and agree that I definitely think we should incorporate the youth a lot more. And I know me and Judith, I don't know if she remembers, but we talked a little bit about like incentives for helping to get people involved. And what I see, and I could be wrong, but what I see about policy is policy can be a little addicting. And once you get a taste of it, you see the power and you see the passion and you see the wisdom that builds. And then over time, once you get started in policy, you see the same people over and over and over. So as we were formulating these questions and thinking about it in the discussion, how, although it's important to have community and, you know, at the table and all different arrays of community, how do we inspire new people to come to the table? Like, what would incentivize people? And you know, me and Judith, we've talked about this in other meetings before, but it was like, should we always just pay people? And then some people have brought up the point where if we don't pay some people, then we don't even the playing field for the lower economic status to be able to be a part of, because they have to work 2 or 3 jobs and things of that nature. So in what other ways could we incentivize people who probably wouldn't be a part of policy to get involved and to get addicted to policy?
I love that, Onisha. And I'm seeing a lot of stuff in the chat that I also really resonate with. You know, I'm thinking about my own experience. I've been helping kind of in the background staff something called the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing. We have some youth members. And again, but it was like 2 members out of a lot of adults. And it was hard for them to feel heard or valued in that environment. We also really worked hard to try to recruit some people who are experiencing houselessness, but it's very hard for them to actually show up and be a part of the meetings in a regular way. And so that was challenging. So I think we have to be creative. And we're going to be doing a youth shout out, and we're working with one of the agencies that works with unhoused youth. And they've invited their clients in to be a part of the conversation, and like we'll provide lunch. And I think that it would really take partnership on a regular basis.
Yeah, I was oh, sorry, go ahead, Anisha.
You're on mute, Andy.
I love that someone brought up our houseless community, because that's the heart and soul of my work in my real life profession. And oh my God, thinking of unique ways to get them involved, like preparing a table of food for them, preparing a table of warm socks for them. Because like Miss Judith just said, a lot of them don't have charged phones. Like my sister is houseless right now. One of her asks of me wasn't for money, wasn't for cigarettes. It was like, sis, can you come get my cell phones and my iPad and charge them overnight? And we don't even think about that type of stuff. Like they don't even have anywhere to charge their devices. So as we think about bringing these people to the table, are we going to be courageous enough to do the things that will bring every community to the table?
Yeah, and just to add on what Onisha just mentioned, you know, we have different groups, you know, which like whose name, like, you know, maybe we can speak today, or like, you know, like they will just be in shadows. But our second question, if we look at, you know, should we have a permanent program to guide governance and oversight work through educational opportunities, information sharing, etc.? So, what this question means is that should we have a permanent structure, like who could do outreach, liaisoning between different organizations who serve vulnerable population? I can already think about different leadership programs in like city of Portland and in Multnomah County, which work with youth, which work with people of color, and other population to develop leadership capability. So should we have a liaison who could reach out to these organization and leadership training institutes, just so that we will have a good pipeline of leader, and we could embed in those leadership program and make sure that we build capacity on tech and surveillance related advocacy and leadership skills too.
And I think there's a second part to this program. I mean, this question, right? The elephant in the room. Like, how easy are we making it to get the information out there? We're working on that, right? But how easy is it already? That not for those of us who are already in policy and in the know, some of the same faces, but how easy is it for the masses of the public to know about forums like this? How often are they made aware? And sometimes I wonder if we gave tax breaks, if you were a part of a governance policy, you would get a certain percentage of a tax break when it's time to do your taxes. We'd have people fighting to be on policy boards, but
Yeah, that's kind of a question I have too, is I think it's, even in this engagement, it's been a struggle to really try to break down this information in a way that's digestible for people. Even I struggle with kind of understanding like the language and the vocabulary, and does it, I'm curious to hear from you all, especially kind of in a grassroots way, does this type of thing require, like informational campaigns that, are pretty widespread and where there's a very concerted effort in just getting people to understand this stuff? And what does that look like? Do you know of any examples where that has been done? Any kind of ideas or outside of the box type kind of strategies around how do we get people aware and sort of educated on these things?
I wonder, because I really appreciate where the question is coming from, but I also feel like it, and in education, you have the same thing where it comes from more of a deficit mindset where we're assuming that folks don't know and they need to understand. But maybe it's, could we hold focus groups that we pay folks for to tell us, or to tell, right, the governing body how to be doing things better to make things more accessible. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think those are both amazing points. And I've brought this up over time. Anytime you think of like a catchy commercial, or like right now, it just started up on the commercials on TV, it's election time. And we know it's election time because they're coming up with their one-liner phrases and they're beating us over the head with it. And at the end of the election, we'll have memorized and learned a lot of stuff. And I think that when you really want people to access information and have the information, you figure out ways to make sure that they know it and they have it, no matter how hard it is for every educational level. So I definitely have talked about how can we make it rhymey, catchy, easy for people to digest. And I have a bachelor's degree, but because I'm foreign to policy, new to policy, it's still hard for me to understand a lot of it. So it's definitely a genre to get used to if you've never been exposed to it before?
When I was in college, I used to do like a lot of like street teams and like guerrilla marketing and stuff like that. And it was a great, really easy way for me to make money and to like meet new people. And I made friends that way. I like found, partners that way. Like it was amazing. And I wonder about doing something like that, like maybe forming like a street team or like a marketing team. And that way we can also maybe engage people that literally have zero interest in doing policy stuff. Like there's going to be a lot of teens that like, they're not going to want to do it. Like they're not going to want to necessarily do policy stuff. They're not going to want to do technology stuff either. It's just not their thing, nor should it be their thing. It's not everybody's thing. But there are a lot of people that love marketing, that love design. And, I feel like we can engage people in that way too. Of course, always going back to the youth, definitely want to engage those youth and like utilize those skills that they definitely already have way better than a lot of us adults do. But also engage adults that, want to learn these skills. They want to learn design, want to learn marketing and different things like that. So not just, for the youth, but offering like intergenerational chances to participate in this kind of stuff, but in a different way. That's not just tech. That's not just, sitting on policy tables, but also is engaging with creative skills,
So it sounds like we have a collective agreement that community should be involved. We should start with the youth and build on that. And as we're thinking about getting community involved, we definitely need to think about ways to engage community to get them involved, to explain the information in layman terms, and to get them involved in different exciting ways that may not be the meat and potatoes of the information, but how to get it out to their own communities. With that, Shira, would you read the last question? I think we have one more question. Sorry, guys, it's hailing out here.
Yeah, so the last question is also one of the most important. How can we incentivize sustained community involvement, especially for underrepresented communities? How can we avoid fatigue? The part fatigue comes, those of us who have, who are like people of color, who are active in the community, and like it might not be even like people of color, like those of us who want to involve in different community forums and in like public policy, we are being tapped by different organizations, different city bodies, different county bodies to be represented there. And if you are involved, like you will see a lot of same faces around, and it's not because people want to do that, but like they are overstressed because they represented like certain community groups, and then they want like a seat by the table, and then not everybody has time and resources to go to different meetings. And so we have community leaders who are stressed, and then who are not who are giving everything that they have, but that is not productive. And so how can we avoid this fatigue in the community, and how can we incentivize the sustained policy involvement, where people will have incentive, like that can be financially like financial incentive or other, like we can think about other incentives, but how can people feel like they are part of the group, they are also contributing, and then they are also happy doing what they are doing. So let's discuss on this one.
The first idea that comes to mind talking about this is it's kind of relevant, but I think often the fatigue comes and you keep seeing the same people at the table because there's just like not enough people involved. So some kind of like a mentoring program where we're teaching other people somehow like how to get involved and like how to show them the ropes. So like when you have something else that you want to put focus on, it's not like all the pressure isn't on you, and we're building up other community leaders at the same time. I don't really know how we would do that, but I feel like that is necessary in so many different levels of policy making and implementation right now.
Yeah. And I feel like the sustainability piece kind of ties back into a question I had earlier, which is, how do we ensure that folks who are folks who are participating, who come from the community, like how do we ensure that their voice carries as much weight as the experts and the leaders, right, the people that are in more traditional roles of power in the room, because I can imagine that, you know, the community feels like their voice isn't being heard and nothing's happening with their input. They're gonna tap out of that interest just as quickly as we might have gotten them to tap in with all of these really creative ways we're thinking about getting them engaged. And I also wonder if, you know, maybe tapping into existing organizations, because like every other thing that exists, like, you know, these things have places where they overlap with things that exist, synergies. And so how can we use either organizations with similar missions and things that exist to help to be that sustaining force for the community?
Thank you. Chris, go ahead. I see your hand.
I just want to mention something that, or bring up again, something that Judith had mentioned earlier about having events where people come together and maybe you offer some kind of food or something. There's some events pre-pandemic that you all did where that's exactly what you did. You brought everyone together and then people get to know each other as well. And then, as someone else said, then when they get to see work that's happening, you know, and that it actually can result in things changing and improving, then they may want to get involved more because of that. But also if there are people who, let's say houseless folks or other people who, you know, if in lieu of money, either, you know, money would help, but also if you're bringing people together and then there's a meal or something that helps give them something for their time. And then they get to know people as well and be involved in the community.
It's a night for quoting Judith. She said something also too about we have to be careful that we're gateway makers and not gatekeepers. And one of the things I was thinking about when Syria was reading the question is that not only do people experience fatigue, but what I see personally in other policy making stuff, that people can get on these seats of policy behind the scenes, and there's a lot of power, right? Because they are creating rules that have to do with money, that have to do with acquisition of properties, that have to do with all kind of laws. And when they do it over and over and they get really good at it, then they frequently get called to the table to help make these decisions. And they do become the gatekeepers. And I think that it's very important. I heard someone say to mentor younger people, to mentor people who don't look like you, think like you, and act like you, to keep the policy fresh and reflective of everyone in the community and not just your own community.
Yeah, and that reminds me of the leadership program that I was part of back in 2013 or 2014, Asian Pacific Islander Community Leadership Institute. And then there are other similar program. I think it was funded by Office of Civic Life, like City of Portland. There are other programs like Bridges Leadership Academy, which are also funded by, I think, City of Portland through a coalition of communities of colors. And then there might be other leadership program as well. And, whenever we attend these leadership program, like I have attended like a different session of other like similar leadership program as well. There are like these days which are dedicated to, for example, public health. There are days that is devoted to public safety. So we can, as we grow, and if we have talked about budgeting and everything as well, we need to make sure that we collaborate with existing leadership program to have a tech focused, privacy focused leadership training as well. And then because this type of program provides kind of feeder network to a lot of other leadership like opportunities in the city, and so they could be part of this program as well.
I think those are great ideas. It's my dream that we develop systems that are more holistic, that do more than one thing at a time. And I really love the ideas I'm hearing about that. So that we actually, I was listening to a speaker the other day on a video, and he was talking about someone, and he said she congregated community around her. I love that idea. So I like the idea of us congregating community around these issues and around us as people who are engaged in the issues. And, for people to feel welcome, they need to feel like, they're going to have what they need to understand what's going on and to be a part of things. I love the piece about youth. I think we should also think about how do we find out what specifically might pertain to our older Portlanders, folks and also honestly people living with disabilities who end up in isolation from the rest of the community. It's been very interesting during the pandemic and being able to have a lot of people work from home and participate through Zoom. It was really clear that there were a lot of jobs that folks who couldn't manage the transportation issues because of disabilities could totally do the job, right? So thinking really differently about how do we make sure everything we're doing connects us to each other, because I think that's super important.
Thank you. I don't know how long you guys wanted us to lead the discussion part. Are we rounding up?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one more point for what Judith mentioned, because elderly population and people with disabilities, usually are in this shadow area, like where they are most impacted by like privacy related stuff, but they don't have any voice. And it is very, very important, at least we can have like like senior advocates in the group or community members who can talk for like our senior community members.
One thing I would also love to see is like data visualization art projects. And, I mentioned creative projects, but I was originally thinking more in terms of like marketing materials and like toolkits to help people understand different new technologies. But I would love to see like, if data does come out of any of these projects, to see like what the visualization of this data could look like, and sometimes the visualization of the data itself really, really tells a story that is like super powerful to people. And I would love to see that happen. I've been to a few like data visualization art, not galleries, I forgot the word, exhibits. And they've been really interesting. And some of them have been interactive too. And I would love to see that too, where it's kind of a presentation to the public, where it's not necessarily requiring their ongoing engagement, but it's maybe like a month-long or 3-month-long exhibit that they can go to on their leisure, and maybe bring people they know if it affected them in a certain way, but doesn't necessarily require people to be at a meeting every Thursday or something like that. Something that people can drop into and really in a quick way, like understand at least some information, and be able to feel like engaged in this process that way.
That's a great point. I also wish there was a way that we could get undocumented people here to participate without fear. I've talked to a lot of people who are undocumented that are extremely intelligent, have some amazing ideals. But this type of participation that we are all in right now, all of them don't feel safe because of the technology and the recording and yeah.
I really appreciate that, Onisha, and I wanted to make sure people understand, like for this project, it's really lovely that we have Surya and Onisha. There are two other folks who have also been hired as community leads. And so they come from work in the community, work with us, help shape how we're doing this. And I know, Anisha, you recently expressed an interest in holding sort of some of these conversations and spaces for people that you know and you work with that aren't like this, right? To maybe provide that level of sort of protection. I think then it's up to all of us to take that input as if people are in the room, right? Like not to just see it as a sideline, but really understand. And, you know, folks without, let's go to houselessness, folks without doors on their house, you know, inside of homes, they are some of the most vulnerable to being surveilled. People who, you know, who are undocumented. There's, as we know we've seen the terrible ways in which the federal government and ICE has used surveillance to track people down. So we know that the most impacted, and that's a core principle of equity and anti-racist work, is those who are most impacted. You know, you start there. You start with what happens to them, and you build out from there. So I think part of it is like Onisha, having people like you and Surya and Johanna and others who are willing to just really take these conversations into communities in places that they might not feel comfortable being a part of it here. And then it's incumbent on us as the city to find ways to, you know, have that be meaningful and enriching for all of us as we create, you know, a city that works for everybody.
And I would also like to address what Jay mentioned earlier about data visualization. We do have open data work that Hector is also part of. So if if Hector may address that, you know, there will be an opportunity for us to, you know, do like data visualization project and, you know, having series data, you know, that can be shared to public, you know, shared in a way that public can understand and utilize that. And that's where these feedback will also probably go, and like making sure that, you know, data, you know, are presented in a manner where public can understand and also interact and actually make use of it.
And I just wanted to add, I'm not 100% sure this is still happening, but I know one of the other leads that I've been working with Alicia, Rosalie, I think her goal is also to create some visualization and like visual learning stuff that's not totally tied to the data visualizations, which I'm really excited to see what they come up with.
Great. Well, we're a little bit ahead of schedule here. I want to make sure, oh, there's another comment here that came in. I like the idea of presenting data and info into public settings, joining events and spaces where new people might be present for another purpose. Tabling and poster artwork with opportunity to provide comment and feedback in the moment, maybe stories about how data could be used in the future. Yeah, I really like that idea too, you know, tapping into existing events that might not be related, but still has kind of the crowdsourcing or like lots of people involved who might be could drop by and kind of participate. And I think it creates lower barriers to participating too. If folks don't have to like come to a meeting or things like that, you know, are there things that people can just drop into? I love the gallery idea, where it feels like a little bit of like less pressure to really actively participate and share thoughts, but you can still get lots of information and in accessible ways. Yeah, pop-up surveys. Yeah. Well, yeah, we're a little bit ahead of schedule here, but so I want to make sure that we captured everyone's ideas and thoughts. So yeah, any final sort of, burning comments or ideas that you want to share out here? And it could be about this particular question or another question that we've discussed before. I just want to make sure that we've captured everything. And again, we'll share this out. So if you think of something, if the light bulb goes off and you're maybe when you're eating dinner later today, you can always come back and share that as well. So we'll open this up to the public so you can chime in.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one more thing. Basically, and using art and data visualization to communicate, that's also governance issues. So we can we could add that to our first set of questions as well, because information sharing is the kind of a first tool to make sure that we do governance correctly, and that will engage public and engage them into this type of conversation to talk about privacy, to talk about surveillance. And so yeah, I think that's something that I just wanted to add here.
I'm just wondering so in 2 weeks we're set up to meet again and to really take these ideas and winnow them down into some policy proposals. I'm wondering if anyone has any ideas off the top of their head, anything they need from us to make that more meaningful for them, that any information, anything that will help people be ready for that roll up our sleeves and dig in session. Please let us know. You can email us, put it in the chat, let us know in all the ways you can let us know if there's anything you would like to add to our policy workshop on the 27th. And also feel free to invite people. And I hope we design it in such a way that, we will have it clear enough that people can come in and sort of weigh in on their ideas and thoughts, whether they've been at this session or not. I like that little typo. I read the Smarty City. A bunch of smarty pants, right? That was good. I just want to say how much I appreciate you all. I had kind of a bad day, and I have to say, this is it just feeds my soul. And so I just want to appreciate all of you. I want to appreciate your care for our collective way in which we move together through the city, and for each other. So thank you so much. An extra special thank you for this great, inspiring conversation tonight.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. And we hope you can join us in 2 weeks for landing all these great ideas into what a policy recommendation might look like.
Yeah, so I think our next event is on April 27th. Is that right?
Yes, Wednesday, same time, April 27th, 2 weeks from now, same time, same station. Different Zoom link, I think.
Yeah,
we'll send an email.
So we'll be diving into the kind of the nitty-gritty of the policy based on this conversation. So we hope you'll join us. Thank you so much. I second Judith's sentiments, and I know it's been a long day for a lot of us. So we can end early here. Enjoy the next 15 minutes that we had on for this meeting. And yeah, thank you so much for your participation. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate everyone. Have a good night.
Same here, Jay. Really appreciated your participation.